This is Success in Excess, where elite founders, lawyers, and clinic owners engineer success through strategy, scale, and systems. Powered by GrowthX.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Success in Excess, the podcast where estate planning meets intention and top legal minds help families move from uncertainty to peace of mind. That's what today's episode is on. Powered by GrowthX, the marketing engine that law firms trust. Operating with over 50 firms nationally and over 100 million in results, we are America's top law firm marketing agency, even awarded that in 2024. Today, we want to talk about estate planning and one of the most prominent law firms in the state of Texas that's really making waves in the industry. You know, we're proud to have Kim Hegwood is a leading charge in ethical, accessible, and deeply human legal planning. Kimberly's not your average elder law attorney. With a background in education and over a decade in legal practice, she's built a firm known for its compassion and empowering families to protect what matters most. Whether you're navigating Medicaid, creating a will, or protecting your loved ones from probate stress, this episode will show you how a legacy is built and designed. Kimberly, it's great to have you on the show today. Before founding Legal Legacy Care, you worked in education, which is rare for an attorney. What inspired your journey into law and specifically elder and estate law?
Okay, Taram, I should tell you, I wasn't an educator prior to going to law school. And so, yeah. And
Okay, guys, that shows you that Google and website analysis does not work. So let's get the real facts on this.
so do you want me to tell you?
Hell yeah, tell us. And I apologize for that.
That's all right. And I'll let you redo the front of that. You'll be fine. And so, no, I've been practicing for 28 years. So when I started practicing, I was a litigator. So I did litigation for about 10 years. And I laugh and tell people that I hit my proverbial brick wall where I just didn't enjoy it anymore. I found myself sitting in my conference room across the table from a client. I started to sit up. I found myself starting to rise because I was fixing to slap the client on the other side. Sat back down and I went, yeah, I'm done. And so after that point in time, I prayed a lot. And then because I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I mean, I've been trained to do one thing and I was very good at it. And if I may say so myself. And then, postcard came in the mail that kind of changed to what I did. Now, all through my practice, I've always done probate, guardianship, and wills and things like that, but really got trained to do a lot more expansive estate planning. And so I did that for a good number of years. And about 20 years ago, my grandparents started declining. And as they started to decline, I realized how much they didn't have, how much they didn't know. And their longtime attorney really didn't do anything for them because he was older. They had wills, but nothing else. And so it really made it difficult taking care of them as they aged. And so I had to learn a lot of things. So I learned elder law before it was a thing. And so on the phone with Social Security, being a caregiver, hiring caregivers, doctor's appointments, and realizing that doctors don't know a lot some days. I tell most people they make very educated guesses, but they did some things that with my grandfather that I was very unhappy with, real unhappy. So for most people, I laughingly tell clients, I've been through the probate from hell, so I've been where a lot of my clients are. Especially now. I've already done it. And so it gives me a different perspective when I'm talking to a client, when they're talking about their family, because I've already lived it. And I think that's what makes me a better planner when it comes time to plan is by having that kind of experience.
Learning about your grandparents is so monumental because especially when you're dealing with estate law, elder law, dementia care, these are hyper personal, hyper emotional. Sometimes one of the most damning situations in a family because you're watching the patriarch, the matriarch generally decline, and there's so many feelings involved. And especially when, depending on what they've done, they've given their whole life to their family. And now, the simple will that they set up 15 years ago is no longer applicable. They haven't set up trusts in situations where, medical bills are just draining the family. And, what they worked their whole life for, their nest egg, their legacy is lost within a couple of months And even worse, you see people end up becoming destitute. Like I've personally known very well off, affluent people that were not properly structured for their legacy with their wills, their trusts, things of those natures. And one spouse is declining and they went from, multi-million dollars in the bank, living great lives, thinking that they were set for the rest of their future. And now they're, moving in, you know, with a child, not because for care, but because, they no longer have the funds to afford a home and the care that should have been. And it's just, it's a very sad situation. I went through it with my own grandparents. Unfortunately, I wasn't an attorney, so I couldn't have helped them in the way that you did. So, it's amazing that you did that. And I think that's also why, your firm has grown so much because people understand that you're not just coming from a point of having, you know, theoretical expertise that are, very well performed in design. You practically understand from a real practical application the emotions involved, how things can go down very quickly, how to, act in more of a active approach rather than reactive. In that aspect, the real question is you've done this. Your firm has expanded. You've grown. What have you taken from it over the past couple of years, after your grandparents? What is the next focus for legal legacy care when it comes to handling clients and expansion? And how do you keep that quality high?
So for us, we look at first and foremost of educating people. So the more people we can educate, the better, because we want clients to make good, informed decisions. We want them to be able to see the pros and cons of what they're deciding on, and we want them to get it done while they're alive, well, and competent, and they don't need planning. Because you find that when people don't plan, then you're in guardianship. You're in probate court under a guardianship. I make a lot of money off guardianship. So does every other attorney because literally we have to file every single document you can imagine ask, file your paperwork, file for monthly allowances, file to sell anything. I mean, everything that needs to get done has to be permission from the court. And so it gets to be very expensive. When we tell clients it's a lot cheaper to do power of attorneys and avoid that, at a minimum, doing power of attorneys because those documents prevent guardianship. So we want clients to really get a feel for, having good documents in place. We started expanding the law practice because my clients were older. And if you live around the Houston area, nobody wants to drive on the freeways anymore.
Get it.
It's almost one of those, what do you call them? Like a derby race. You're dodging cars and tires and, trash and things like that. And people just don't drive that well, especially here. If it even sprinkles or, and God forbid, if it snows, everybody stays home because we have no idea what to do. And so we started trying to find smaller offices, to where we could be where the people are. So it lessens their drive, makes it easier for them to come to us. That way I know they're getting a good plan, so I know they're getting good taken care of. So when you start to think about, how you do it, for us in the office, I think we change things a lot because we're always looking to improve. How can we make the experience better? How can we make it a really positive and just a wow experience? So we do a lot of changing up, trying new things to see what works, what doesn't work. We'd have a lot of, somebody does a plan, somebody else reviews it, so that the plans go out, they're accurate, they're exactly what the clients are looking for. So it gives us an opportunity to really fine tune what we do and to do it well. And then I tell clients sometimes, if you've got a plan in your head, I can probably draft it. So come on. And I've done some wild drafting in my day, as far as clients that had a very unique idea of how their plan should work. But ultimately, it's very individualized because everybody's different. Everybody's families are different. And so it makes a huge difference when you're thinking about, what works for one family is not going to work for everybody else. And so that makes it, really, really apparent when you sit and talk to as many clients as I have over the years.
That makes total sense. You guys are always changing. And, the great part about you is, when I asked you, why have you guys expanded? And, traditional answers are, because we're trying to expand, we're trying to make more money, want to have more of a market share dominance. And, the firm is growing and we're doing great. And, yours is such a client centric approach where, the first thing you said very naturally, we want to make sure that we're more accessible to where the people are. They don't like driving in these hectic traffic roundabouts and when, when inclement weather happens, especially they're older. I mean, for them to drive extended distance, it's difficult. It puts a lot of risk at that. And, that's your focus. And it's amazing because it's so honest that it's refreshing at the end of the day because you definitely don't just hear about that. And to segue into that aspect, with elder law, what have you seen in Texas probate or Medicaid pitfalls that really most families don't prepare for? Like, how are the systems built in Texas that you see pitfalls where people are consistently failing at if you had to give them advice?
So the first thing is they don't plan. So when you don't have a plan, that's your worst plan. I laughingly tell people when I do workshops and things like that, if you have no one you love, the last knife you can stick in their back is doing nothing because it's painful, it's expensive. I've seen the kids crying in my office. They couldn't believe mom and dad did this to them. And sometimes not just because they didn't like them, it's just because they just didn't do it. Probate itself in Texas is pretty easy. We have a pretty good probate system as far as, it doesn't cost a lot to get through it normally, but creditors get paid in probate. So we tell people in Texas, probate is a lawsuit that you file against yourself with your own money for the benefit of creditors. Let that one sink in. So creditors get paid in probate. So in my practice itself, we do everything we can to avoid probate because I can avoid creditors and things like that. It's a must when you're doing Medicaid planning because the only time Medicaid can come back in and get recouped from whatever they spent is as a creditor in probate. So when you're doing long-term care planning, we have to make sure that nothing passes through probate because that gives the client the best opportunity to take care of the spouse that's home. Because it's usually what happens. You've got a spouse at home and you've got one heading to the nursing home. And the last thing you want is that spouse at home that's healthy and has another 10, 15, 20 years of living to be broke to take care of one of them. So we do a lot of things to kind of pre-plan if at all possible, and really just try to put clients in the best possible place we can put them in that allows them to meet their goals, get taken care of during their lifetime, and maybe, take care of children or grandchildren or whatever they choose to do, but really for those that are married to help protect that spouse at home. So maybe there's less that they have to pay, or at least it gives them the ability to have a quality of life while they're still living.
Absolutely. You couldn't have said it better. Now, let's go into the real meat and potatoes of everything. You are one of the top performing legal minds in the field. You are well known, you are documented to be an expert in the field. How has scaling your firm really been? Like, what were some of the obstacles that you had to overcome in the beginning? And what do you think one of the, foundational success points are that has led you to able to continue to grow, continue to scale, while continuously being able to still keep that high level of consistency across the metrics?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is mindset, limiting beliefs. You have to get past that. And so for me, getting past a lot of pre-programming that you get as kids in society, growing up, really kind of limits what you think you're capable of and what you could do. So I got lucky in a lot of times. Opportunities presented themselves that were advantageous for us being able to grow. I have a great team. A lot of my team's been with me for a while now and that are growing with me. My longest employee has been with me for about 26 years of my 28. So she's been with me for a while. Everybody else is running somewhere between, 2 to 10, 2 to 15, I think. A couple of new ones, but mainly more in the 8 to 15-year mark. And so it really helps because we have a nice group. We know what everybody needs to do. Everybody does their job and they do it well. And they actually enjoy taking care of clients. And I think that's the best thing is that you have a group of you have team members that say, you know what, it's so rewarding to come to work every day and take care of families.
And okay, so when you start, well, first I have to say, guys, you automatically know she's, one of the best leaders because who has employees 26 out of the 28 years? 2 to 15. Usually life cycle value of most employees, especially in this industry, ranges from 3 to 5 years unless they're on the partner track or something of that nature. Now you do find paralegals that last longer, but that all directly correlates to the quality of the firm, the quality of the leadership at the head of the firm, and what they're doing to actually bring it back to the people, the employees, the staff, the people that really help the engine move forward. And it's a testament of, the environment that you've built, right? Not just are you people centric with your clients, you're also focusing on the employees that is the lifeblood of your firm. And I'm assuming that, you guys are a very cohesive team, and, to spend 2 to 15 years with the same people, generally you have to do it because you want to. And 26 years, definitely, that's longer than most marriages.
I like
So awesome, awesome. Now, elder care in a marketing concept targets the field of obviously people that are elders, but we're looking for estate planning, elder care. I'm assuming your target clientele is what, 58, 60 and above, generally a net worth 750 and above, unless they're looking at some other metrics. So what's your take on that, on making sure, let's say if there's another firm owner trying to build out their estate firm, where would you say is the sweet spot when targeting clients that really have that intent and need for your service?
usually married clients and you're looking for non-retirement assets, at least 350,000 or more, because what you're looking to protect are those people that don't have a lot of assets a lot of times, so but it doesn't make a lot of sense till you get about 350 or higher. On average, nursing home, if it's just traditional nursing home in our area runs about 6 to 8,000 a month. So you kind of plan for how much, can I get past the 5-year look back period? If I drop it into an irrevocable trust, can I make it? You also have to keep in mind, that a lot depends on other money, what their income is, what they're looking to do, because some people want a private pay. I have some clients that have pre-planned and have that irrevocable trust and they still private pay because they like where their loved one is. And for me, that's fabulous because it gives more clients options. And I think that's the best thing is that they have options. When you don't pre-plan, you have one option. It's a crisis and it's usually ugly. And I tell
Yeah.
people that, that when you're in a crisis plan doing Medicaid, it's not pretty because you're having to do a lot of things you're not going to like to qualify that person. You may have to spend down some money. You may have to gift, you may have to do things that you wouldn't normally do had it not been for that crisis that occurred. And so it makes families very scared to have to do all that stuff. But there's a lot of stuff we can do, to protect things and help people. It's just a matter of making sure that they know that they know that, hey, we have options if you pre-planned. We have we still have a few options when you're crisis planning, but they're usually very limited in what we can do.
And they're usually not the most favorable outcome as well.
No, we can almost always get them qualified for Medicaid. It's how you get there is the painful part.
So let me throw one off the cuff for you, right? Let me give you an example. And what would you generally say, what would be an appropriate route to start out with? Is that okay with you? All right. Let's say we have an individual that owns a law firm, private practice, smaller law firm. They have about 3 to 5 million in assets, but they have a terminally ill spouse that that their sickness is not an immediate killer, but generally it's going to take 10, 20 years. It's going to be progressive. The bills are always going to increase. There's always going to be consistent, more healthcare costs. What would you say would be an appropriate route for someone in that specific situation to protect their assets but at the same time be able to give their loved one and their spouse the highest level of care without totally draining whatever they've worked their whole life for?
So you have to keep in mind that professional practices are different than other businesses because not anybody can come in and take over a law practice or a doctor's, physician's office. You have to have those licenses. So it makes a difference, in planning. A lot of times when someone has already been diagnosed with a certain illness or whatever, you can't get life insurance, no, so you can't get a lot of life insurance to kind of help supplement. You may, do your very best to make a whole bunch of money, put it aside to try to beat that 5-year look back period. You might have to, private pay for just a little bit, but then maybe you can protect a lot more. And a lot depends on what the spouse is doing. Does the spouse work in the law firm? Does the spouse have their own career? Because that makes a difference as well. In Texas, I can protect retirement as long as they're getting their required minimum distributions. But if they're not, then we have a problem. So we have to do alternatives. So it makes a difference depending on the type of business. Now, if it's just a regular business, the business can be exempt. Income still gets paid to the nursing home. So it makes a difference in whether that person's getting paid or not paid. If they're not working, do you really pay them? Maybe the spouse is working. So it's okay to have the spouse a little money, but maybe the person that's not working, maybe you don't pay them anymore. Or you pay them a lot less because they're not working. Maybe you just pay them, maybe dividends or a little profit sharing kind of, enough to where the profits are being distributed, but nothing else. So a lot just depends on how much we're talking as well. How much were you making to what you're not making? What are your bills? What do you need to survive? So there's a lot of things that come into play because we don't want them to be completely destitute trying to qualify for Medicaid. But a lot of times, if they come in ahead of time, you can do a lot of pre planning. For clients that have an illness, we always update their power of attorneys frequently. And so if I know they've got an illness, I'll update them every couple of years, every year until they can't do it anymore, because that's the last one they're going to be able to use. And so you want it to be the most current one you can do. So that way, and then ours are very powerful because of my elder law practice, because of what we experienced over the years. We have a lot of extra stuff in our financial power of attorneys. So it gives the person, their agent, the ability to do planning, maybe if they didn't do it, to do more planning, to do things they couldn't do otherwise to help, help with long-term care. So we put extra stuff in ours that other people don't. I tell people our statutory durable power attorneys are worth their weight in gold just with the extra stuff we put in there. Because as we've run into problems, we've adjusted our power of attorney. So we add a lot of extra things in ours. That makes a huge difference when it comes to planning. So an agent under a power of attorney can come in and do almost anything to help plan for someone who maybe didn't plan. And sometimes it's a matter of they may have a little bit that they want to go ahead and spend. They may want to try to keep them home for a little while. Maybe they can go to assisted living for a little while to help beat that 5-year look back. So maybe they don't need long-term care. Maybe they just need something a little extra. So we work with geriatric care managers around the city and around the state to work to see what can we do to help them if they want stay at home longer, and transition them maybe slower if at all possible. So that way it helps minimize the cost for a while, depending on who's available. But I'm a big proponent of caregivers taking care of themselves. I watched my grandfather just about kill himself taking care of my grandmother. And he had a stroke that almost put him out. And he bounced, managed to bounce back from that. But the second stroke required, 24-hour care for both of them. And after the first stroke, it was like, okay, I'm taking over. I'm now fixing things. So you just enjoy life because I'm now gonna fix it all. Because he was from the generation, and I still see a lot of my clients, it's been 20 years since they've passed, and I still see a lot of my clients that'll do the same thing. It's especially men, it's my responsibility. I'm the husband to take care of my wife. And I'm like, well, that's great, but you have to take care of yourself first, because sometimes you have to ask the hard question. What happens if you die? And if you don't take care of yourself, you're going to die first. So what's the plan? So, and then having conversations with the clients, what do you do for fun? They're like, I don't know. I'm like, we need to find you a hobby. You've got to have something that you enjoy doing. What can you do? So it makes a huge difference in a lot of factors. And so we really get to know our families because it makes a difference in what they're looking for, lifestyle, things like that, and what they want. When we're doing planning, we're asking those questions and we're having them give us more information. So it talks about, like when we do trust planning, do you want to stay home as long as possible? Yes. But are there any conditions to that? One of my clients who was diagnosed with Parkinson's had a sibling that they wanted taken care of. So in their trust, the provision was, I don't want to stay home. If the cost of care at home exceeds the cost of care of me going somewhere else, move me and sell the house. Because they wanted the majority of the money that they could possibly have to go to that sibling that had a disability that was going to need lifetime care. So it makes a difference in who they are, who the client is, who their family is, what's important to them. So all these factors depend on how you plan. So it really makes a difference in really getting to know the client to know what's the best plan for them.
Each client, like you said, is different, and everybody has different values, come from different cultures, different priorities. And one of the things that you touched on, which I think is probably one of the most important, if you're a caregiver, you can't help others if you can't help yourself, right? And if you don't help yourself, you're going to be in a position where they're going to be lost without you. You have to prioritize, your health, your care to make sure that you can also prioritize your loved one. Because what happens, personally, I can say, my grandfather, my grandmother, she went to a nursing home, had dementia, and she's very, rapidly but slowly declined at the same time. And my grandfather, his life literally consisted every single day. He was at the nursing home for 6, 7 hours. That was his day every day. He was healthy and he, everything like that. And he actually passed away first because that became his life. And, obviously at that point, my grandmother rapidly passed away even after that. But you see in that situation, if you had talked to anybody at that time, you could have put dollar for dollar bets and been like, he's going to live longer. I mean, he was walking, he was driving, he was, making his own food. He actually just sold his house and moved in with my aunt to, just be closer to family. And he even got a, fitness instructor like the week earlier. He had, a massive, heart attack from diabetes and he was gone. And everybody had bet, my grandmother with cancer and all these other illnesses was going to go. And that's the reality of it. So as someone who cares for others every day, how do you recharge and stay focused?
And I have grandkids. So a lot of times that helps. Definitely keeps me active. I've been trying to adjust my schedule so I can travel. I like to read, not anything work related, just stuff that really hard, so really just spending time, with family is what I tend to do a lot. I have great grandkids, and so I get to spend a lot of time with them. And like I said, I've been traveling with my mom, which has been really fun. So it gives me an opportunity to really spend some one-on-one time with her, and that's always good. And
Yeah.
really just getting out and trying not to, spend a lot of time in my recliner.
You say that again.
Yeah, it's the worst thing you can do, sitting home a lot. So you try hard to stay busy and things just, I've got kids and grandkids and sisters and mom, and so lots of family and friends. And so we just try to stay busy and do things that are fun. And so, like I said, travel, all the kinds of things we like to do and just have fun.
Awesome, awesome. Live your best life. That is, you have to live life for life itself. If you're not living, then you're just existing. Experience life and everything that it has to offer. Personally, I love traveling and I love trying new foods. That's one thing I do really like. And you see a lot of people that work hard, they're very focused, very successful, and a lot of times they lose focus on the things that are, also important, such as, building communities, building relationships. Because at the end of the day, guys, you don't get buried with your money. It doesn't go with you. What you actually have that lasts the stand of time is the relationships you built, the impact that you had on others when you were here. What are they going to say about you for the next 100 years? If you're lucky, what impact did you have on your community? These are all, very important things, at least to me, right? As well as obviously being successful and building my company. These are something that I've always hold paramount, especially family as well as monumental in the pillars of my life. Now, one of the questions I do have for you: you guys are expanding. Obviously, you guys are generating quite a few estate clients, elder care, geriatric, dementia. I mean, you name it. You guys are definitely niche down into this field of focus. SEO, social media, PPC, where would you say that in this specific field have you seen the best marketing tactics to bring you the guys the best results? And what do you think just doesn't work in this field?
Oh goodness, it's interesting because I think different things work differently. With estate planning, we have a huge referral sources from clients, financial advisors, CPAs. For Medicaid, target and you spend a lot of time with nurses, hospital workers, case managers, nursing home administrators, nursing home business office, personnel. And then, with probate, it's interesting because we don't do a lot of advertising really for probate, but we get a lot of it. I laugh and tell people it's not really from our clients because we try to avoid it. But just really SEO, I think, tends to work for that. It seems to work for that better. We didn't have a lot of luck with probate and guardianship when we were doing, ads for it because you got a lot of weird stuff. It never really seemed to do well. See, and LSAs tend to work pretty decent, with the state planning. SEO, like I said, SEO helps a lot. Social media helps a lot. So we're on all the different platforms. I have a lot of people under my personal stuff because I set that up years ago before you got to do business stuff. So I was even telling somebody, I said, somebody needs to do something with my LinkedIn. I've got over 14,000 people on my LinkedIn, somewhere right around in there. And I'm like, there's a huge market out there. Somebody do something with it. So it makes a difference, I think. And I think it makes a difference in how you target. when you're thinking about marketing because I think it makes a huge difference. You have to be very consistent. You have to have a brand that resonates with clients. And for us, we just changed our name 3 years ago. So we had to rebrand as Texas finally said we could use trade names. So we wanted a name that resonated with what we did. It's kind of long, but it covers. We spent some time really debating the issue because it really covers, all the different practice areas that we do. And so for us was, we really had to go back and say, okay, now what do we got to do? Now we got to rebrand. It's almost like starting over. What I didn't realize was the expense of having to change all my marketing materials. And so
Yeah.
I didn't plan really well. We just went, "Oh, we're so excited. Let's just do this." And we just kinda went with it, and everything else was a hope and a prayer. But, we do a lot. We try to do as much community involvement as we can because I really enjoy doing things in the community. I've sat on a lot of nonprofit boards over the years because, it's a great way to give back. But I've been blessed. We've had a lot of great clients over the years, and they send us a lot of business. They're great to come back and update and spend time with us and then send family. I've done generational planning. So where parents came in and then they brought the grandparents in and the kids are in getting their planning done. So we've done a lot of generational planning. And that's really a great way to plan because then it helps people, if they know about what they might inherit to go, to say, okay, how does our plan, will our plan work if I inherit a few $1,000,000? Or do we need to do something different? What kind of planning should we do? Depending on the age and the health of the kids when you're doing planning for the grandparents, maybe the child that's going to inherit, maybe they have an illness. So we don't want them to inherit directly. We want it to be in trust so that we can protect it. So a lot of times it's very, you want to be able to do generational planning because we can do better at protecting the future generations by knowing what we know about all the generations. And so it gives you a nice opportunity, so I don't know that one thing really works. I do know that when the pandemic hit, we had been doing a lot of things in person, and then the pandemic hit, and we had to switch, and really change everything we did. So we unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you put it, became very digital oriented at that time. And so I think between 2020 and 2021, like just in a year, we grew 42%, so everything that we were doing, we transitioned. We did all our workshops in person. Now all my workshops are on my website. So now they're all taped. They're on my website. Anything topic you could possibly imagine that we've covered is on there. And so really, it just really changed the sphere. AI is going to change how we operate a lot as well. So that's going to be a big change. So you got to embrace that, embrace it well in the right parts of it, so that you can grow, be more efficient in it. Because I think it's not enough just to grow these days. You also want to be profitable. You have to be able to sustain, the ups and downs and the roller coaster rides and I did a lot of roller coaster riding and early in the years, and really learning from other people is huge. I joined probably in the past 10 years. I've belonged to different groups, different mastermind groups. I've had different coaches because I think it's important to learn from people who have already been there, done that, and they teach you how to grow and how to be better. So the other thing too, Taryn, I'll tell you real quick before I forget, we started running the law firm with EOS.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it's been really fabulous because I have a leadership team that we basically make decisions about the law firm. And then all the departments have department teams, and everybody has goals for each quarter. What are we going to accomplish in the quarter? So that kind of you doing that helps move us forward because we're always thinking about what do we need to do to get to the next level? What do we need to do to help the next, to help the next clients? And so by doing that has really, I think EOS has transitioned to my law practice a lot as well.
Well, EOS is fantastic. At GrowthX, we follow a revenue acceleration system that's similar to a model used in mergers and acquisitions, where our whole goal, our team is built in subsections, have growth and sprint runs to make sure. Let's say if our goal is to get this firm to 500,000 a month. And from 500,000 a month, we're trying to bring profitability up 15%. We have to build a roadmap to get there. So we have actionable insights and everybody's accountable. And as a team, this probably better than anybody. When I started my company, I honestly sometimes got exhausted with always having to come up with all the ideas and being like, we should try this. We need to do this. And I'm like, why aren't you guys, I see these problems. Why aren't you guys coming up with, suggestions on how we can implement? And for the longest time, A lot of my team in the beginning, was a very employee employer relationship where I felt that at that point in time, they didn't have the ability, nor did I foster their ability to own their work, to own what they're doing and own their future. And now with them being able to help with making decisions, their input is more valuable. Not only are they, they feel a higher level of respect, but, each one of them, and I'm a firm believer of this, I'm not the smartest person in my company by far. And I would love to hire smarter people every single day, harder workers every single day. And it's nothing that intimidates me because that's what I want on my team. I want the best of the best, and I want them to be able to, flourish and reach their full potential and not just be in a position where they're task doers. So you grown 43% in that 1 year. So we're about 5 years later. Tell us the number that you're at now in growth wise.
We've grown over the last 5 years 65%. I had somebody ask. So I said, I know that number. Otherwise, I'd have to go do some mental calculations. But ironically enough, somebody just asked me last week and how
Beautiful.
we've grown in the last 5 years. I said 65%. So it's
Beautiful, beautiful. And that's such a great number, guys, because 65% is a when we talk about business scalability in our business model, right? Where we scale firms. The first underlying most foundational point that we want to focus on is sustainability. And Kim, you brought up a very valid point. Can you sustain the roller coasters? And in those roller coaster months, the seasonal depressions, the dips, that's where you actually learn the health of your business, the value and the actual structurally sound ability of your business. Because if you can get past slow months and you're still profitable, you're not over leveraged, over expensed out, your staff, your support, and everything is still there. And yes, you still made profit, that shows that the company is healthy and you're not, asking for a line of credit. You don't know how to pay the rent. And I've seen a lot of businesses over the years, mess up the financials, and the potential there is very high. I'm talking about firms doing for, a smaller firm doing 350, 400,000 a month in revenue is pretty good. You see some of them, I had a guy that came for consulting to help him grow his business. He was doing about 350 a month, but only 20 of it was profit. Like literally he was so expensed out on offices, staff, associates that weren't bringing any like partners, like they weren't bringing any clients in. They were just feeding off the marketing budget. So pretty much he was just pushing everything out. And he's like, realistically, I can't even really take the salary I want because at the end of the month, this is what's left over. And his whole financials were upside down. And that's where you said, monumentally earlier, we don't just want growth. We also want to focus on profits because revenues are great. But if it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. Realistically, I'd rather have a business doing $100,000 a month and I'm making, you know, 50 $50,000 profit than have $1 million a month business and I'm only making $100,000 profit. It's just an upside down vertical that you really have to overcome. And Kim, one of the things I am so impressed by you is the fact that as an attorney, you are an expert. Hands down, you're an expert. You know this topic in and out. Not just that, you've also mastered the art of business, which a lot of firm owners, like I said earlier, just aren't able to switch those two thinking caps. And you've blended it so beautifully. You've implemented systems in your company that really fosters real growth, real stability, real sustainability that, I feel that in Texas, you're going to be a household name in a couple of years because you're building something that is not only, legal legacy care, you're building your own legacy at the same time. You're doing an amazing job at it. You've grown a firm. And to testament to how strong your firm is, I mean, you guys survived COVID. There's a lot of firms. I don't think people realize it. There's a lot of firms that folded in those years that was unable to make that transition into digital and capitalize on it. And maybe they're still around, but they're like picking up pieces and trying to catch up because they had a catastrophic failure in that time where, you beautifully just seamlessly transitioned to it. You might have had a little bit of setbacks here and there, but the overall picture is a win-win-win, So in that aspect, what would you say the future for the firm is?
when you think about, because I've kind of waffled there for a minute, about, how far do I want to go? So, because if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have told you that I wanted, many law practices all around the city, each of them standalone that could take care of themselves, regardless. When it got to where, we wanted to transition to not just one area, but to multiple areas, we have a lot of satellite offices, but now we're kind of moving from satellite to our own space. So now it's back to, it almost seems like it seems like we're growing, so we're trying to do it better. And the goal, half the battle is having good people in place that help you grow. Having a good marketing team or company, having a good, financial advisor that, CFO, somebody that's looking at your books, that's making sure they're taken care of. My books are updated every day, so I can see numbers anytime I want, so it makes a difference in, we look at, all the stats that we look at in marketing. I know what my conversion rate is for everybody that does sales. I can tell you that really quickly. I can tell you, I can tell you the conversion rates of where it came from. So if it came from financial advisors, what the conversion rate is. So really learning your numbers, knowing your numbers, and getting better at doing all those things and doing it the most efficient way possible gives you the opportunity to really grow and expand and really hopefully one day, be considered, a powerhouse, when it comes to planning and, and really helping families.
Awesome, awesome. So we have a few questions in our lightning round, and we're going to wrap this up. Kim, today has been just an amazing conversation with you. So insightful, and just, a vision for the future for really what your firm is going to be. What is a favorite book or podcast you're into right now?
I've been reading Patrick's the EOS books. I've been reading those. I love David Nagel, The Successful Mind. I do a lot of work with him still because I think the whole mindset work has made me a better leader. It's made me a better business owner because I can now look at things differently than I did before when I was starting out. So it makes it easier I can remember back when I first started, if somebody wanted to leave, you were like, oh no, we now were it was dread and doom, because somebody was leaving the firm. And now we're excited for their growth and their opportunities for them to, to go on to new things if they want to do that. And I really think a lot of that is just really good, really good mindset work, So I do a lot of that. Got a lot of different coaches for different things because I think everybody has a unique ability to do stuff. And so I watch a lot of webinars and things like that. Listen to podcasts when I drive, but I really like The Successful Mind.
Awesome, awesome. So you're always on the pursuit of knowledge. Great. If you weren't an attorney, what would you be doing?
Well, I went to school because my mother, bless her heart, she's such a brilliant woman and still is. She told me, she said, well, she wanted to know what I was going to study in college. And I said, well, I don't know. I guess I'll just do pre-law. I know I'm going to law school. So, and she goes, but if you don't go to law school, what can you do with that? And I said, I don't know. She goes, you're going to teach? I went, oh, good God, no. So she said, you probably ought to have something that you can, bounce back from. So I have a degree in management information systems. So the irony of that is I came out of college as a programmer. It also makes me a
Wow.
better drafter because my brain works that way too. So it came easy to me, that sort of thing. There was a point in my life that I thought that if I wasn't doing this anymore, I'd probably go into something like the ministry. I'd like to be. And there's still a part of me that may do that as I get older, not necessarily be a pastor of a church, but to do a little more, where I can, Bill. So God's been good to me. And so he's put a lot of things in front of me. I used to laugh and tell people, you pray and you say, point me in the right direction, but please do it in neon lights because I'm not getting it all the time. And a lot of times he's done exactly that. But the best thing I can tell people is there's always an opportunity. You have to learn to recognize it when it hits, when it comes up, recognize it's an opportunity and jump on it because it may not come around again. So it's really important to, a lot of times you got to take a chance. It's okay to fail as long as you tried. You want to make sure that you at least, because you grow from those learning experiences. I've always
Absolutely.
thought that everything in life was a learning experience, not good, bad, ugly. It's did I learn something from it, and did I do better the next time? And that's important. But, a lot of times we just tried things, especially with COVID. We're like, we were shooting in the dark. We'll just try this. We'll try this. We'll just have some fun. We'll try this. If that didn't work, we'll try something else. And so we really had a lot of fun. In some aspect, when you think about it, it was a little terrifying at the time, but we had a lot of fun just trying new things because we had nothing to lose. And I think I still run the practice that way. We try new things because, we're good at what we do. So I'm not really worried about it failing, but we're always looking for new opportunities, new ways to do things, new ways to help a client, and just do the best that we can be.
True. Okay. And you're right about that. And when it comes to successes and failures, I have a personal belief that, every failure gets you closer to a success and every no gets you closer to a yes. And that's just the reality of it. You got to keep pushing, you got to keep trying. Your real only failure is when you give up, because there's lessons to be learned in all of them. And I've learned probably more in my life from failures than I have successes, because you take those kind of for granted. You focus on the success and you're like, yay. A failure, you actually look at a deep dive into it, why it happened. Sometimes people go a little too deep, but you look at it, you address it, and you remember the feeling that it made you feel. You remember what took you down that path and why it was a failure. And generally, most people, sometimes, like me, you might take 1, 2, 3 times, but generally you learn from that and you say, hey, I'm not going to do that again because I know what the result is. And you apply it, you take, course, take your, change of action, and you move forward. And eventually you get, all the pieces in place and you find the success. And it makes it that much sweeter. Today, I said, Kim, thank you so much for coming on the show. What you're doing at Legacy Care is a blueprint for modern legal practices, grounded in really a client-centric focus. You guys are not just changing lives for today, but changing lives for the future generationally. Really putting that whole standpoint on the name that you've built is monumental, because a lot of times people just make a name that people are going to remember. But that name that you have is pretty much an embodiment of what you guys do, all in all together. And we wish you the most success with that. For anyone listening in Texas who wants to plan with clarity, dignity, and peace of mind, reach out to Kimberly Hegwood. Kimberly, how can they meet you? How can they get out to you?
The easiest thing to do is just to call. You can call 281-218-0880. And you can always go to the website, and it's legacylegalcare.com. So it's scheduled, called. We're happy to see you. You can call the one number. We'll get you scheduled wherever we need to. If you don't live close to one of our offices, we do Zoom, and we do, because I've got clients all over the state, so we can help anybody anywhere.
And you guys are only in Texas, or can you offer help to clients outside of Texas?
No, we're only in Texas.
Only in Texas, guys. So if you're in Texas, reach out to Kimberly Hegwood. She's got you covered. Legacy Legal Care. Remember, that's your Legacy Legal Care. And to the law firm founders ready to scale with intention, GrowthX is here for you. With $100 million in client revenue generated, $10 million in ad spend managed, and systems that elevate your brand, not dilute it. Check us out at growthxmarketing.ai. Let's help your firm thrive with legacy and integrity. Until next time, my name's Tarun Singh. I'm the host of Success in Excess. Please subscribe, leave a 5-star review. If you like today's information, if you liked our podcast, or even if you want to get in touch with Kimberly, you can find her information below in the description of the actual podcast, and we'll make sure that it makes it very easy for you to get in contact with her any single way. Thank you, Kimberly, for being on the show. And until next time, guys, stay smart. Remember to scale. And remember, the most important part of growing a business is sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Own your growth. Scale with systems powered by GrowthX. Subscribe to Success in Excess for those who lead with precision and scale with purpose.